Dibs and Grandi with you here on Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game, breaking down what would be a successful season for the Warriors this year. I think no matter what happens, maybe aside from some very crazy results, the final 18 games, this season is already a success because you were able to fight through issues through 4 of your entrenched starters and you're over 500 thanks to some unexpected contributions by your young guys and your rookies. Dibs isn't quite on board with that, but I'll try my best to maybe change his mind over the next couple of hours here on 95.7 The Game.
You can change it.
I don't know if I will, but I'll try.
Yeah, try as you might. And I love that the contributions of the youngsters have been good and the veterans have been, by and large, not as good. But here you sit as a 10 seed and you've got championship pedigree and you've got teams ahead of you in the playoffs who are unproven. And I think that if you can get through the play-in, you've got a real shot against any of the top 4. Denver, not as much.
That would be tough.
Denver would be tough. And they look like they're trending toward the 1 seed. So for me, you got to get to the 8. Then you win the 8-7 game and you become the 7, and then you play the 2, which is either OKC or Minnesota. Minnesota's hurt. OKC's unproven. I like their chances. I'm not ready to settle for, well, good year, no matter what.
And I'm not saying I don't think that is at all possible. Just for me, I think that there is a larger picture that makes this season worthwhile. Makes the issues of this season worthwhile because it kind of forced you to find what you have with these young guys. So are you more on Dibs' side and success relies on what happens the rest of the season and into the postseason? Or do you agree with me that what the Warriors have already realized from their rookies makes this season, at the very least, a small positive because they were able to find things that they did not know that they previously had? Let's go out to the phones and try to answer that question. 888-957-9570 is the number to call. It's also the Comcast Business text line. Up first is Michael in Alameda. Michael, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs. Grandi in for Willard today on 95.7 The Game.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, Michael, what's up?
Yes, I have a couple of ideas and a comment. I think and believe a successful season to me would be for the Warriors with the roster that they have. If they can get into the playoffs, win the first round of the playoffs, move on to the second round, and maybe take the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed or whatever seed that they're going to face to 7 games. If they can push the issue and make those teams work to beat them, make them beat them, give some experience to the young guys, some playoff experience, and get them some veteranship, and maybe work on a championship for the next 2 or 3 years. Do you understand what I mean? And maybe get a big guy or a big person coming in, another veteran coming off the bench, Klay Thompson accepting his role. Draymond can keep his nose clean. And I'm basing this off of one criteria. Greg Popovich, over a 20-year time span, won 5 championships. So I think Curry, the big 3, they're at their, 15th, 16th year. I think they got some years to play with. Use this year as a trial year, moving into next season and start off the season better. Because I think the 2 suspensions that Draymond drew on brought everybody down type of thing, and maybe they can get on a good foot and good start next season. That would be a successful season to me.
Yeah, I appreciate the call, Michael. Thanks. I think you're right in one regard specifically where I agree with you 100%, and it's this, and it's where I think your outcome is obviously certainly better for the Warriors. Even if they fall short of winning a championship, Dibs, which is in all likelihood going to happen.
Right,
we can both agree on that. Even if they fall short of going to the finals, even if they fall short of making the Western Conference Finals, it would still be extremely valuable and would make this season more of a success if they at least go to a playoff series, maybe win one and lose in the second round like you did last year, because it allows Kuminga to get much-needed postseason experience. Same thing for Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis, because if you get there, you're going to do it thanks in part to those 3 guys, and you're going to play them in the postseason, and they very well might struggle. I mean, generally, that's what happens when you're introduced to postseason basketball for the first time in your young career. But getting that experience under those guys' belt, as our caller Michael was talking about, maybe makes it more likely for you to make a deep run the following postseason.
Agreed. And last year, Kuminga had almost no postseason experience.
And
he had a
rough.
little bit, and it was rough. And Podziemski and TJD obviously were still in college, so
he got benched. Kuminga did was that game 2 in sack?
Right.
I think.
And, he got benched. His minutes went from 16 to 8 to 4 to 0. Yeah. And I pulled up the game log last week when Willard was in and ran it down. And basically, he didn't play until in the Lakers series. He played garbage time, and that was it. And that's about as disrespectful as it gets when you go from the rotation to now we need a body. Get in there. You're a body. Now you get to play.
Yeah.
That was the diss that he got last year, and that's kind of what he had earned. So I would love to see them get into a best of 7 with Denver, OKC, Minnesota, the Clippers, whatever it is. If you get there, there's value in that for them. And you're right, not only for this year, and maybe you make some noise, but for next year as well, when you're going to lean on these guys even more. We don't know who's going to be back next year.
Yeah, we don't. I mean,
Draymond and Steph, yes.
For sure, locked up.
Wiggins should be. Wiggins is locked up. But
he's under contract.
The feeling is that he might get dealt. Paul is gone. Clay is up for grabs.
Yeah.
Kevon Looney's contract is not guaranteed. I would bet he's gone. GP2 has a player option for $9 million.
He's opted in, I would imagine.
I would imagine he opts in for the 9 because he's probably not getting more than 9 elsewhere, and he loves it here. And you got Pods and TJD and the other young guys, and that's your team next year. So, yeah, you would love these guys to get a real taste of the postseason.
Absolutely. Of course you would. Because if not, maybe you get to the postseason next year. Maybe things go really well for you next year. But then that's Kuminga's real introduction to major postseason minutes a year from now. And same thing for Podziemski, and same thing for Trace Jackson-Davis. And Moody played a little bit more than Kuminga did in the playoffs last year, but not a ton, maybe even a little bit more for Moses Moody as well. So I'm not saying that there's nothing more that can be gained for the Warriors this season, but even if it ended, it went up in flames, the final 18 games of the regular season, I still think for the Warriors, it is a net negative. What do you guys think? Or, pardon me, a net positive, not a net negative
right.
for the Warriors this season. 888-957-9570 is the number. Up next is Tim in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Tim apparently agrees with both of us, Dibs, so I want to hear this. Tim, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game.
What's up, guys? So this is where I come with Dibs, man. It's sickening to think that Dibs, not only 6 of them they threw away, they probably legit really threw away about 10 games. But, I mean, legitimately threw them away. I mean, just gave them away. And even if you give them, let's say we give them 7 or 8 of those, I mean, Dibs, they literally playing for the 1 or 2 seed right now. So, but now, after what happened last week with Chicago and San Antonio, I think it's a wrap, Dibs. I think it's at this point, a realistic fan, we got to say, you got to kind of think the way Grandi is. They blew those 2, and it ain't no coming back from that. I just don't see it. I just don't see them making any noise from a 10 seed, and we would be super unrealistic to think they're going to win 2 road games. So, I mean, as crazy as a fan I am, I would love to see these guys get that postseason play. But I think the Chicago and San Antonio from last week, because at least they would be 36 and 28. And they would probably be tonight playing for the 7th seed, but they blew it, man. And they blown way too much. And this team has this year think about how much belief has been put in Andrew Wiggins this year. Going back to last year, it has been so much faith put into this guy. And I just think we've blown it on a lot of fronts. We've blown it with Draymond and the suspensions. We blew it with Wiggins having to tap out again, and now he's back and he's still not all the way in. I mean, and we blew it by throwing away all those games. So the only saving grace, the only thing we can look at these games for now is to see continued growth, man. We can't realistically think they're going to make noise from the 10 seed, Dib. So I agree with you 100%, bro, that they completely wasted the damn season by giving away 15-point leads and over again in fourth quarters. But at this point, you got to kind of transition and say that what Grandi is saying, man, is right, bro. So I do agree with y'all both. As hard as it is to know that they should really be 40 and 24, like Dibs just said, basically. But we can't go back and get those, man. So, I agree with both of you guys, fellas. Hey, Grandi, you doing great, by the way, too, man.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
He's doing awesome.
And good call as well,
Thank you, Tim. And he's right.
It is a nuanced conversation.
Explain, agreeing with both of us. But I think that looking at where they are now and going up and folding your tent about what they still could do, to me, is a loser mentality. And yes, they've given away at least 6 games. He said 10 or he said 12, whatever
he
the
said
number.
they'd be playing for the 1 seed. I wouldn't go quite that far
either. But whatever they gave away, that's done. But this team, and Steve Kerr said it to us yesterday, they are good enough to still go on the run, and I believe that.
Let's hear it from Steve Kerr. Here is what he said when asked about the season ahead and if they can still make noise. Here's Steve Kerr.
I just feel like, the season it's long. It really is a marathon, and you're going to have stretches in both directions, during the season. Things either go well or they don't, and I feel really strongly that our team is primed if we can, really stay healthy here down the stretch, get Steph back and stay healthy from there. I feel like we can make a really good run, and you never know what happens. If you do that, you could end up in a good spot and set you up for a good playoff run.
And Steve Kerr yesterday with us here on Willard and Dibs.
Yeah, and that's where you have to be with a veteran team that's already done it. And you think about where they were 2 years ago when they won the chip, and it was a bit of a different year because they were so good early, and then Steph was out, and you kind of floundered late in the year, but then you got everyone back, and you thought, okay, we can go on a run, starting with the postseason, and they did. And so Steve Kerr is thinking about that muscle memory and the fact that they've had runs. They've gone on different runs. You went 73-9 and you blew the chip, and you had a year where you weren't that good 2 years ago, and then you rallied and then you won the championship. So anything can happen once you get in the playoffs. And right now it's about trying to avoid that 9-10 game. It's trying to get up to the 8, and where they sit right now, they're only 2.5 back of Dallas. So you win tonight. Now you're 1.5 out of the 8. Tonight is huge.
Oh, it is huge. And so is Saturday, because you're playing the 2 teams that are directly ahead of you. You're the 10. The Mavericks are the 8. You've got them tonight. Tip off in less than 3 hours now here on 95.7 The Game. And then the Lakers, you play on Saturday. They're the 9. And 2.5 games separate those 3 teams. The Warriors, the 10, the Lakers, the 9, and the Mavericks, the 8. And our last caller, Tim, in North Carolina, talking about they've given away 10 games, and if they just win like 7 of those, they're competing for the 1. Even if you just talk about the last 2 games they lost, the Bulls and the Spurs at home, I think games most of us had chalked up for wins. Now, one of them, you put an asterisk on it because Steph didn't play at all, but it's still the Spurs, and you just beat them on the road without Steph. So you could call those both should have been wins. Even if you just win those 2 more games, Dibs, you're 36-28. You'd be 1 game behind the Kings for 7 and a game and a half behind the Suns for 6. You'd be right there.
You would be right there.
That's how quick things turn at this stage of the season, because not only are you losing ground, but you're also running out of time to gain that ground back.
But if you look at what they have left, 18 games, and 5 of them are head-to-heads with the Lakers and Dallas. So just those games
if you take care of business in those 5 games.
Right. Even if you go 4-1 in the purest of form, and you got 3 against Dallas and 2 against the Lakers, so you go 2-1 against Dallas, you would gain a half a game, or actually a full game.
Full game.
And if you go 2-0 in the Lakers, you would gain 2 games, and that right there is 3 games, and you're 2.5 back of Dallas. So everything else equal, you would be the 8 seed. Just those 5 games. Plus, you got a couple more. You have 1 more San Antonio. You've got a couple of Portlands. You got a couple of Utahs. Your schedule's not that difficult, but you have to win these head-to-head games in order to really gain the ground that you want to gain.
Yeah, that begins tonight. Again, the Warriors are in Dallas to take on the Mavericks. 5:30 is the tip-off. Pre-game coverage begins with Dibs and I right here on 95.7 The Game at 4:30 in a couple of hours here on 95.7. But for now, we're trying to figure out what success looks like for the Warriors this season. I think it's already been a successful season because they found something with their young guys that they can build off of going forward. But Dibs is right. They still have an opportunity to accomplish something positive this year in the postseason. Is that what makes this season a success, or are you with me that it already is? Let's go back out to the phone lines. 888-957-9570. Up next is Joe in San Jose. Joe, what's up? You're on Willard and Dibs. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Loving the topic, by the way. But I think you're both right. Honestly, I think the season has been a win so far. With everything that you've stated about the growth and the youngsters. If they make the playoffs, when they make the playoffs, they make some noise. I think that's a bonus too. Like the previous caller said, you're going to get experience for your young guys. That what makes good veterans going forward. But I think it's a mistake to sleep on the Warriors. The playoffs start, everything resets to zero. They are a different beast in the playoffs. They always have been. I hope everybody sleeps on them. I'm of the believer. I want to bring back the we believe. I want to do hashtag we still believe. I want to get that going because I think it's a mistake to think that the Warriors to count them out. You shouldn't count them out because betting against number 30 is a mistake. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, appreciate it, Joe. Do you think the Warriors are still a different beast in the playoffs? They still have that? Do they still put fear in opponents like that?
No, they don't. But, I mean, you could win a game, and if you go out there and you win game one on the road, then all of a sudden you put fear into an opponent. The tough part is going out and winning 4 games in a best of 7. And I look at this team and just look at their individual or their collective efforts over the course of any 7-game stretch, and it's hard to find a 7-game stretch where any one of the 7 is really elite or great, and let alone the whole collective. They haven't been that team this year. They've played well in spots. They've beaten bad teams. They've pulled off a couple of nice wins. They've had good stretches where they've won, 5 in a row or 5 of 7. They won 10 of 14, and wherever they sit now after their back-to-back losses before the win over San Antonio, I think it's 14 of their last 21, something like that. They've been good, but a lot of those games have been against weak opponents, and individually, they haven't all been great. And so I think about, can they strike fear in an opponent? Yeah, they can win anywhere, but can they win 4 times in 7 games against Denver or OKC or Minnesota or LA? That's a tall order.
Very tall order.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we think of, you think last year the Warriors were the 6. They took on the 3-seeded Kings. And the Kings, a nice story last year, right? Yeah. The guy normally sitting in the seat, Mark Willard, called them adorable all, the 2 weeks of that series. And he ended up, at least being right that the Warriors won that series. But what you also have to consider was that the Kings were the 3-seed winners of 48 games last year. 48 games, and they were the 3-seed. 48 games this year is going to get you
the 6?
Yeah, maybe the 7?
Right. Right.
Like, the West is so much deeper this year. So to pretend that a team like the Thunder, a team like the Nuggets, a team like the Timberwolves, and I guess you could throw out the Nuggets because they have that proven postseason experience, and that is not a fair comparison to make to the Kings of last year, who had very little postseason experience. But to say that the Kings are on the same level as the Thunder or the T-Wolves, Dibs, I think is a little bit misleading, because while one of those teams might be the 3-seed, they might have like 10 more wins than the Kings did last year.
Exactly. And right now, the Phoenix Suns are on pace to win 48, and they are the 6.
Currently,
and Sacramento's on pace to win 48, and they are the 7. And Dallas is on pace to win 47, and they're the 8. So the numbers that you're looking at just to get to the 8, you got to win probably 47 games, and the Warriors right now have 34, and they've got 18 left to go. So they need to go 13-5 just to maybe sniff the 8. It's much taller cotton this year for the Warriors than last year.
Yeah, it really is. The Warriors last year won 44 games, and they were the 6.
Yeah.
And that's not going to get it done. 44 games is probably going to get you the 10
exactly
this year. And you were the 6 last year with that amount of wins. So it's certainly more challenging for the Warriors and for everybody in the Western Conference this season.